Hi, everyone. Thank you, Tanya. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. I think a lot of people are going to continue joining, but let's start meanwhile, Tanya.
Sure.
So, Tanya, we have two major colleges represented today. We have LSR and Delhi College of Engineering, which is now DTU. And of course, we have people from IIT Madras, IIT Delhi, BITS Pilani, IIT BHU. It's a very, very exciting group out here. So let's hear it from LSR. LSR, can you raise your hand, please? LSR, raise your hand. There's so many lovely young women from LSR. DTU, where are you? Let's see you now. Please raise your hands. Wow. So we already have more than 75 people here. And I think we are going to cross 100, maybe even 200. But let's get started.
Sure. Thanks a lot, ma'am. All right, let me maybe bring up my screen. Is it visible? Can
Yes,
you guys
it's
see the?
visible. Yes.
Oh, perfect. Hello everyone. Thanks again for joining. Hopefully this session will be useful to all. Please feel free to keep asking questions on the chat. Just put it on the chat. As and when during the presentation you have any questions that come in mind, or if you've already had certain questions, hopefully we'll cover some of that already. But if not, then please do put it in the chat. And Shweta ma'am, please do feel free to stop me in the middle in case there's something specific that you'd like me to cover or something that I've missed. I can do that. Okay. Just to begin with, maybe some tidbits about me. So I am currently working at Bain & Company. It's a management consulting firm. I've been there for about 5 years now. I also did a small stint with Gupshup, which is a SaaS platform for sending business conversational messages. I did basically a 9-month stint there just to get experience in the industry, and then I came back to Bain. So currently I'm working at Bain. I graduated from IIT Madras, did a dual degree in chemical engineering. Not that that degree is being super useful now because I'm a consultant, but super amazing time just going through those 5 years in college. I've interestingly lived across different places, from Nagpur, which is famous for oranges, to Gujarat, to now having done my undergrad in Madras and now currently based out of Bangalore. So a couple of years in the south. I'm a big foodie, as you can see from the pictures there. But yeah, so I've had experiences across different cities, met different people and so on. And this year I'd be going to Wharton. Super excited about that experience as well.
Tanya, I see here that you've recorded a little bit about Wharton on what kind of scores are required to get in there. So would you like to throw some light? Because I believe these are mere averages, one. Two, these averages tend to reflect more of the Western world and they may not work for Indians. Would you like to tell us something about that?
Sure, and you're the expert, so please do feel free to add in here. You're right. So I think some of these scores are reflective of what the overall community that get into Wharton or other B schools would be of. So just quick stats, maybe of the entire class in Wharton, about 35% make up the international folks. Rest all are based out of US. So the average would of course be skewed towards that a little bit. Also, the GMAT score that you see here is from the old edition and not the focus edition, I believe. So I think the average there will be slightly different based on the way it's calculated now. In terms of GRE, I think from what I understand and what I've also seen from Indians' perspective, I think the quant score probably be a little higher than 162 that you see on the screen. Verbal, maybe Shweta ma'am, you can tell us what the actual average score for the Indian ones would be. But yeah, that's overall, as per my understanding, how the score would probably look like if you're applying from India to Wharton or any other B school.
That's right, Tanya. I have seen the quant averages to be closer to 170 and verbal closer to 158, 168.
Yeah, so there you have it.
Okay.
All right. Moving on, just want to also walk you through what my journey was like. And as you can, and as I'll walk through this, I'll also, you will see that I didn't start with GRE to begin with. I started my journey with GMAT actually, and then eventually switched to GRE. So overall, I started my prep in mid-Jan. I joined Catamount Labs with Shweta ma'am, started with their live classes around, mid of Jan. Classes, I think, ended about April end or mid of April, March end or April mid. And then I was basically spending my time doing practice tests to see if I'm able to even get the target score that I'm looking to get in GMAT. And over a month and a half, those practice tests went on for, I kept practicing questions, worked on my accuracy. At the point where I started getting maybe scores that I wanted to get is when I booked the date. And I gave my first GMAT attempt in first week of June. But unfortunately, I did not get the score that I wanted to get, which meant a couple of more months of practice. But quickly, I gave 2 more attempts with 1 month gap between each of them from June to August, 1 in July and then 1 in August. But again, unfortunately, for whatever reason, I could not get my score at all. I think that's the moment where I had to reevaluate what I wanted to do about this. I spoke to Shweta ma'am, and she suggested that maybe we should look at GRE at this point, right? And at that moment, all she suggested was just go on the GRE website, open up any of the free tests that are available, and just give a test. See if you're like, let's see what kind of score you get, right? If it's a score that we can really work with and it's like not very off from maybe what your target score would be, let's actually shift to GRE, see if that works out. Else we can always come back to GMAT, right? Like again, GMAT, GRE both have a limit of 5 attempts. You can give up to 5 attempts over a 1-year period. So there was always an option to come back to GMAT, maybe spend a little bit more time, perhaps take a break before it, spend some time, and then give another attempt. So around September is when I gave the test. And looking at the score then, which of course I'll talk about in subsequent pages, is it gave me some confidence that maybe this might be a good strategy to try. So I shifted to GRE and majorly focused on verbal, while also continuing to do questions on quant, just so that I can keep that momentum on. In terms of the course or the syllabus that you would cover in GMAT versus GRE is not very different from a quant perspective. Just the question types might change, and we'll talk about that a little more. However, verbal has some new sections, new types of questions, and that's where most of my effort went in. Around end of October, I gave my first attempt, scored a 326, which was great. I kid you not, and I think Shweta ma'am knows this, I was so relieved to finally get a score that can let me start applying to B schools. But I also knew, having given that attempt, that I could push the score a little further. That 326 gave me the confidence, but it also sort of informed me that no, there is so much more that I can do. It's probably perhaps stress or something else that causing me to not perform my very best. So I spent another month in November just focusing on the areas that I was making mistakes in, or my weaker areas. Spent some time practicing that. And then towards November end is where I gave my second attempt and finally got a score of 333, which I'm very happy about, of course. But at the same time, given this was very close to R2 or round 2 applications, which typically happen, the deadlines typically in first week of January. I'd also started working on my applications alongside my previous score, so that I do have enough time to build that application and do justice to my profile.
So Tanya, with this very, very generous slide that you've made, sharing the entire timeline, you've helped us break some myths here. Myth number one, you went to an IIT, so GMAT would be easy for you, or it would be very natural for you to score on GMAT. Myth number two is that you cannot use a GRE score to apply to a B school. Both of these are myths. GMAT and GRE are both adaptive tests, they're both psychometric tests, they're both standardized tests. They are just testing different skills. So if one algorithm doesn't work for you, it's absolutely okay to switch to another algorithm. And it makes more sense sometimes if you're trying out both exams, that is, to switch from a GMAT to a GRE, which is what Tanya did, which is why Tanya is saying that some of the skills were similar. And the ones which were not similar, she had to pick those up. So the transition from GMAT to GRE is usually easier. The other way around may not always be as easy. It will require prep from scratch usually. But then a whole lot of you, most of you here today are in college. And if you are thinking even of an MS, if you're pursuing a dual degree and later you want to do a PhD, so irrespective of what trajectory you want to take, it may not be a B school, you will still need GRE, whereas GMAT is only for B school. I wanted to bring in this clarification. So how do these scores translate? A 333 on the GRE is like a 760, 770 on the GMAT. We are talking old scores since those are the ones we still understand better. And even the 326 was a decent score. It's something that she could use to start applying. That's why she started working on her applications. So as you think of questions, please keep putting them in the Q&A box. We will come back to them. Tanya, you want to add anything here?
Yeah, I think you also see a box at the bottom, right? I don't know if any of you are getting bogged down by the long timeline that you see. That's probably an entire year-long timeline for just getting a score on an exam that you would typically think should only take a couple of months, right? So just a caveat here, right? All of this happened while I was still at Bain. I was working alongside. So one, probably in hindsight, if someone would have told me, if you're right now in college and are looking to maybe think about doing an MBA later in your years, now perhaps is probably some time that you could put in to do some prep and try giving an attempt, if at all, because time can be a very valuable resource when it comes to all of this.
You know, recently, in fact, just this last Monday, 6 days ago, we were at Sukhdev College of Business Studies, and we gave them a GMAT scholarship test. This consisted of 700 to 800 level questions and was to be done only in 40 minutes. 400 people took this test, or more than 400, and 40 people aced it. And no, we had prepared only 10 prizes and 40 people aced it. We were totally blown away. So this tells you that not only in college do you have more time to practice for the test and get them out of your way before you get stuck with work, you are also in a higher IQ period of your life. The moment you leave college, the dumbing down begins. Tanya, do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So please take your exams in college, and they're valid for 5 years. Okay, let's proceed.
Yeah. Okay, so just quickly giving an overview on what's the exam like for GRE. And like I think Shweta ma'am's already mentioned, yes, GRE is accepted by B schools, by most B schools, 90% or so, I think so. But of course, do double check before you're applying to any of the schools that you're keen on, just so that you make sure that that's not something that's going to be a problem later. Overall, the exam has 5 sections. It's a total of 1 hour 58 minutes. It does not have any break in the middle. So in case you're not in the habit of sitting for 2 hours straight, that's something that you'll have to build. And of course, that's not very hard to do because I'm sure all of you have given some exam or the other, right? It's just a matter of, I think, building that muscle if you've not done that for some time. It has 3 main areas, if I were to call it that. The first is analytical writing. It is basically one essay that you have to write within 30 minutes. It gives you a prompt on, for example, the prompt could be, should schools have uniform, right? What's your opinion on it? It's an argument-based essay, so it's basically looking for how you're able to defend your opinion and make logical arguments towards or against that, right? It's out of a score of 6. Typically, a score of 4. I mean, from whatever I've heard, GRE analytical writing versus GMAT, it's the scoring mechanism for AWA and GRE is slightly more strict. So if you don't get a 5 or a 6, that's completely fine. Typically, I think 3.5 or 4 above for Indians is what's considered good. The next 2 sections are the more important ones, if I were to call it that, from a score of 340 perspective. So one's verbal reasoning. It has 2 sections. One section's for 12 questions, the other's for 15 questions. And you can see the time for each of those sections on the slide. It has different types of problems. So one's text completion, where you would have 1 blank, 2 blank, or 3 blank questions, and it will ask you to fill words that fit the meaning of the sentence best. Then there's sentence equivalence, which asks you to basically choose a pair to fill a blank that fits best the meaning of the sentence. Then there's critical reasoning, and then there's reading comprehension. So those are different types of questions that you would see in verbal. It's scored out of a 170. Similarly, for quant, again, it's 2 sections, 12 questions and 15 questions each. The time here for quant is slightly higher than verbal. It's approximately about slightly less than 2 minutes per question. So that's what's for quant. Again, in terms of the syllabus, it's pretty much the same. You'll have different stuff from algebra to geometry to general logical reasoning, but it has different types of questions. One is a comparison-based question where they will give you 2 options and you have to answer whether A is greater or B is greater, or they're equal, or you can't decide. Then there's multi-choice questions, which is similar to either you have one answer, you have multiple answers. Data interpretation is based on graphs, data, where it will give you certain information and then ask you questions based on that. And then there's also numerical entry type questions where you just, your answer is just a number. And of course, there's no options there. So you have to fill in a number based on the question that's asked. This again is scored out of a 170. In terms of the order, AWA is always the first section. You'll always start with the essay. After that, unlike GMAT, where you could choose which section you'd want to begin with, after AWA, either a verbal or a quant section comes up, and then they alternate. So if after AWA you get a verbal section, then you would get quant and then verbal again and then quant. Or if you get quant section first, then you would get quant verbal and then quant verbal. So that's how the flow of the exam happens. Any questions? Anything else, Shweta ma'am, that you'd like to add here?
I think it's important to note here, Tanya, that the quant level for most Indian test takers, they find it slightly on the easier side, and they're able to score almost 100%. And it is on the verbal section that most people, need more practice. Of course, if you come from a non-quant background, non-math background, you would need to work on quant also. So if I take a quick look at the questions, if there's anything pertaining to the structure itself, there is a question on how much time did you put in every day to study for GRE?
I will come to that in subsequent questions. Maybe I'll spend some time across each of the different sections for that.
There is one basic question on what's the full form of GRE. So the GRE is the Graduate Record Examination. And like we've been saying, it can be used to apply to a multiple variety of courses, everything from an MS to a PhD. And yes, it's increasingly being accepted by all these schools. I think we can proceed, Tanya.
Yeah.
Other questions are more around how you worked on your accuracy, how much time did you put in, and how you prepared for round one, round two, and so on.
All right. What I would do now is maybe pick each of these sections, each of these type of questions, and just go through what my strategy was, what my learnings are, and of course, a quick overview on what sources or prep material you could use. So just starting with quant, the biggest one, practice is key here. Just practice, 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 and there's nothing else that you can do for quant. Starting with review all concepts. Whatever you see in the GRE exam, we've all done that before in school. So there's nothing absolutely new that you're going to see here. There's this book called Nova Math Bible, which has a good summarization of the different topics and what kind of questions can come up. So that's a good one to just start with. You can quickly skim through each of the topics and just identify what kind of patterns or what kind of questions come. And I think what helped for me when I was prepping is just making note of the important points or important things that I found or tips and tricks that I found in certain types of questions. Of course, along with any formulas that you had to use in questions in a separate notebook that I would keep for myself. What I would do sometimes is just open it up and just read through all the notes that I've made so far so that I can keep it fresh in my memory. The second big one is note down every error that you're making, identify those problem areas, see if there are any patterns. For example, if you're doing 15 questions and most of your errors are, say, in geometry or within certain specific types of questions within geometry, then you know that that's the area that you need to work towards and maybe do more questions there versus the ones that you're already good with. Again, keep revising concepts. And one very important thing is to just solve timed questions. Especially if you're afraid of the clock ticking every second, every minute, just keep your phone or just keep your watch on the side, put a timer, see maybe how much time you're taking in the beginning to even solve 10, 12 questions, right? And over time, instead of just looking at the watch later on how much time you took, maybe set a deadline for you that I have to solve these 10, 12 questions within that time period, no matter what. It will help you with your time, but also will take away the stress that you might feel during the exam with the seconds just passing by. So that's the second one. And the third one, the key to getting a 170 in quant is just to be consistent, to not think of it as a big thing, but think of it as more fun puzzles that you're solving. The questions are, like Shweta ma'am said, easy for all of us. They're not that hard. Just make sure that you practice or keep practicing some questions every day so that you're improving your accuracy, especially in your problem areas. And again, that 170, getting that 170 is very important and it's not that difficult, right? So just always use time sets. Like in the actual exam, you're going to have 2 sections of 12 and 15 questions. Just do those 12 and 15 questions every time that you sit down to practice quant. In terms of books, like I mentioned, Nova is one that you could start with. It's very good for revising concepts and it has different types of questions that GRE has. However, in terms of like actually building your accuracy, perhaps use the official guides instead of the Nova Math Bible. I have found that the questions in Nova are a lot more easier than the actual exam, but it can give you a sense of what the question could be like. Again, use official guides to solve actual questions that have come up in exams before. There are also specific GRE quant reasoning practice questions, which are again official books. Manhattan has a great question bank, and it has a lot of questions, much more than what you would find in official guides. So that's another resource that you can use. And of course, any tests that you would take, just keep, if not specific areas that you're solving for, perhaps just keep doing those 12 questions, 15 questions, small tests, so that it has a mix of concepts and you can just see how you're faring against in the entire exam. in terms of time, I think someone had asked that question. In terms of time, perhaps quant, given I put a lot of practice during GMAT as well. While I was practicing for GRE, I would perhaps do one or two sets of 15 questions each. So 30 questions totally every day or every 2 days, so that I'm in that mode of giving the test, but also doing questions at the time. And maybe if I do find too many errors, I would do a little bit more questions on those areas as well. So that's for quant. Moving on, for verbal, the biggest one here that I found was time management. It is super, super, super important for verbal. Use whatever you are able to learn from vocab, or the time that you save during your vocab questions for reading comprehension. The most amount of time that you would take to solve questions in verbal would be in reading comprehension and critical reasoning. So saving any time that you can get from the rest of the other questions like text completion and sentence equivalence is going to be very important during the exam. Again, in terms of what worked for me, take notes again and revise every day, like I mentioned, doing that for quant. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Tanya. There is
I think my
something on the
screen is stuck.
Yeah, you can give it a minute. So we now have more than 128 people attending, and lots of questions are coming in. Do you want to take up a question meanwhile, Tanya? I think Tanya will just be back. So I can see a few questions around. There is a question on applying in round 2 versus round 1. So the question is applying directly in R2 a good decision based on your experience if someone doesn't get a target score by round 1? That conventionally people believe that round 2 intake is less. Round 2 intake is less because less people also apply. But those who do apply in round 2, we've always seen a good response. We've seen good conversions. So I personally don't have a bias of round 1 versus round 2. A lot of schools, they give out their scholarships in round 1. You get less scholarships in round 2. That is a reality. But if you miss round 1, there is no harm in applying in round 2 at all. Yatin is asking about where to pursue a master's. Yatin, you need to go onto usnews.com and look up the school rankings. So when you're deciding what schools to apply to, you have to ask yourself a few questions. You have to ask yourself, what is it that I want out of this course? Is it a brand value that I want? I want academic rigor. I want to build a network. I want great placements. I want to pay off my loan quickly. So depending upon what's your end goal, what is it that you're getting out of the experience, you will apply accordingly, choose your schools accordingly. Sometimes a school may not have the highest ranking, but it can have the best placements. Sometimes it can have a high ranking, but not exactly a rigorous curriculum. So you have to ask yourself, what is it that you want out of the course? There is a question on timeline. I'm in my third year of college and want to target fall 25. What should be my roadmap for GRE prep? So if you're targeting going to school in fall of 25, you need to apply in fall of 24, which means you need to apply in September. You need at least 2 months, maybe 3, 4 months to prep for GRE, get your score. So I am not sure if you'll be able to apply in round one, unless you are working on the applications in your own. If you really need the assistance of a consultant, then you would need to have a score, let's say by June, so that a consultant can work with you. So maybe you should target round two then, get your score in the next 2-3 months, and then start working on your applications. Round two deadlines are typically in the first week of January. But you're in third year of college. So is it that you want to target a deferred admit? That is not clear. You can ask a follow-up question around it. Because if you're in third year of college, why would you target fall of 25 unless you're looking at doing an MS? If this is not an MBA inquiry. I will just check on Tanya. Tanya will be back in a minute. She's just restarting. Let's look at your questions meanwhile. So Anisha has a very good question. What is the role of college CGPA? If your CGPA is low, your GRE or any other exam that you're taking score needs to be slightly higher to compensate. And that is the advantage of taking these exams and applying with the scores. So the CGPA is very important, especially if you're looking at a deferred admit. I hope everyone knows what a deferred admit is. If I'm in the final year of my college, if I'm in the doing a 3-year course, it has to be the final semester of my 3-year course, a 4-year course, and the final semester of your 4th year, and so on. The final semester of your college life, you apply for a deferred admit, and this is only for MBA. If you make it, then you guarantee your seat, and you can join that course 2 to 4 years down the line. So we have so many of our people from our community who have scored a deferred admit offer. They applied in the final semester. April is usually when the deferred admit timelines happen, the deadlines. And then they join the course. Let's say they want to go to Wharton. They can get 2 to 4 years of work experience. They can do whatever they like. It's not a conditional admit offer. It's not conditional to what work experience or what you're going to do in the meantime. So it's actually setting you free to do whatever you want and then join the course. So if I am applying for a deferred admit, naturally the CGPA, my college extracurricular activities, the internships that I do, the letters of recommendation from my professors, those are going to be very important. Similarly, for an MS or a PhD that I apply to while I'm in college. But if I have work experience, then work experience takes a little bit more of the front seat. And I can use a GMAT GRE score to make up for what happened in college if my CGPA is not good. I hope that helps.
Hi, so sorry. Ma'am, you'll have to give access to video.
Yes.
I can't switch on.
Yes, I'll just do that.
Hi, so sorry. My Zoom stopped working. So I had to
Welcome
restart.
back.
Okay. Let me bring that up. Yep. All right. So just continuing where we left off. So in terms of the first point, right, like taking notes and revising every day, I think that's important for verbal as well, and more so for verbal. The approach to solving reading comprehension and critical reasoning questions really works. So it's very important that you make that a muscle memory, and just stick to that approach, because that will help you save time. That will also help you with accuracy, and get you to your target score. Revise your notes every day, even if it means for 10 minutes. And that's super important for the vocabulary section within verbal. That vocab word list is your best friend during the GRE exam. Make sure that you are going through that word list every single day. Keep noting down every single error that you're making. And what I mean by that word list is, for questions such as text completion, such as sentence equivalence, you'll need to know what's the meaning of the word, and not so much exactly what exactly is the meaning, but more so which words mean similar. So you would need to understand which group of words could be fitting within a sentence. And hence, going through that list every single day is super important, so that it's in your memory and you don't forget it during the exam, right? Cross-referencing each error, just noting down which words you couldn't remember, which types of questions you made errors in, and making sure that you revise that every day is really important. Figure out what works for you. What I would do is, I had an Excel with me while I was doing sentence equivalence or text completion questions. Every time I would find an option or a word that I could not remember what the meaning was, I would write it down in that Excel and type the meaning or the key for which group it belongs to in front of it. And then every day from then on, I would keep visiting back to that Excel sheet and keep writing down the meaning in front of it. Just writing became a tool for me to memorize what the word meant. And as and when I keep adding more words to it, that list kept becoming longer. But even then, I would go back, start from the beginning, color code the words that I could remember versus not. So a green would mean that, yes, I remembered this word correctly. I would mark words yellow where I could, to some extent, remember what it meant, but couldn't really identify what were the other groups in that word list that the word belonged to. And red would be the ones that I absolutely do not remember at all, right? So I would color code, and every day, once I revisit those words, I would change the colors for the words. So more reds became yellow, more yellows became green, and so on. Seeing a lot of greens will give you a lot of confidence, and also will make this a little bit more fun. So it doesn't feel like you're just sitting and cramming up words and mugging up for this exam. But yes, just going through and looking at those errors is super, super important. And again, similar to quant for this, time practice is really crucial. Similarly, you can take sets of 12 questions or 15 questions, do a mix of different types of questions, including reading comprehension, critical reasoning, and the vocab type questions together, so that you can build that muscle of being able to write the exam the way it would come in the official one. And after every test, analyze what mistakes you've made. Again, identify patterns, identify if there are certain specific types of questions that you're making errors in. For example, when I was prepping in reading comprehension, there's a question which asks you to choose multiple answers, multiple options as the answer. I would make a lot of mistakes there. So I kept looking at what exactly was going wrong. Was I missing out important things from the paragraph, or was I interpreting things in the wrong way? And it really helped me bring my accuracy there. In terms of sources, again, official guides, please only solve official questions. I think there are a lot of questions that keep floating around, but it's super important to focus on the ones that are more likely to come. There's also GRE 1014 practice questions, which has a long bank of questions, and they're good questions to use. They are slightly on the tougher side, perhaps, but if you are able to get good accuracy there, I think that's a great confidence booster. Again, like I mentioned, vocab word list is super important. I think it's a bank of about 1,500 words, and most likely most of your GRE questions will come from that word bank. So it's not a matter of just looking up a dictionary and trying to figure out everything that exists in the world. It's just 1,500 words. It's not that difficult. Again, for RC and CR, you can also, as an alternate source, and if you want to practice more questions, you could also use the GMAT official guides. Those really helped just to, at the starting point, just to make sure that the concepts, you're able to apply the concept, you're able to apply the approach that you've learned on how to solve these questions. GMAT official guides has really good set of critical reasoning and RC questions, so that's something that you could use. And of course, like other testing softwares like Kaplan or Barron, you can use those questions as well to do your time sets and do your practice tests for this. For AWA, you don't need writing skills at all to ace this. Again, it's more testing on whether you're able to make logical arguments on whatever is the opinion that you're putting forward for the question that's been asked. One, practice writing a few prompts end to end. Do not just read through the sample essays that are available. It will help you get an understanding of how you actually behave during those 30 minutes on where you spend more time versus not, where do you get stuck, how do you need to even identify how to go about questions here, because this is going to be a black box. You wouldn't know what kind of questions to even expect. So I think that's the best way to practice this. It doesn't have to be writing 50, 100 prompts. Just a couple, I think, are good enough, or good starting points, at least, to get comfortable with this section. The other important thing is to plan out your strategy. You have only 30 minutes to answer. So make sure over those practice questions that you're doing, you're able to figure out what would I do in the first 5 minutes, what would I do in the next 10 minutes, and so on, right? Just break down those 30 minutes on how you're going to use it. What I would do is maybe first 5 minutes, quickly I'll read the prompt, and maybe in the dialog box where you actually need to write, I'll create different sections just to mark out what all I need to write. So for example, my first paragraph would be, I need to write the intro. Some of it maybe I'll already write from the prompt. Then I would demarcate 2-3 paragraphs on what the actual content is going to be. And then there will be finally a conclusion paragraph where I'll summarize what's the take that I'm writing about, right? So just marking those help me to know that that's what I need to aim for, and not more, not less, right? And then, of course, take another 5 minutes maybe to think through what exactly are the points that you're going to write in the main body, and maybe what kind of examples that you want to use, any data points that you want to use, and so on. So just having that material clear in your head on what's the content going to be like will make it very easy to just quickly write down the paragraph, right? Then after that, it's only a matter of writing sentences. Everything is there in your brain, on your notepad. It's just a matter of writing it down on the dialog box, right? And the last one, which again is super important, is the stance that you take in that essay does not matter. Again, it does not matter if you agree to what the question prompt is. It does not matter if you disagree to the question prompt. The only thing that they're trying to see is whatever you're writing, is it making logical sense? Are you able to back it up with actual content rather than just high level writing the same sentence in different words? Make sure you are adding examples, you're adding anecdotes, you're able to bring your point of view more to life than just simply talking about the topic in high level, right? And if you see the sample essays that are available, especially in the official guides, you would see that they've also demarcated, or they've actually given samples for each of the expected scores that you would get for certain essays. So they would give you essays for a single prompt, one that would score a 6, one that would score a 5, one that would score a 4, with explanations to actually tell you why it is a 6 or a 5 or a 4, right? And through that, a lot of those explanations actually were about someone who got maybe a 3 or a 2 is just repeating the same sentence in different languages. They're not actually adding any value apart from what they are saying in terms of what their opinion is, right? So it's very important to read those through. There's also an entire question bank that's available, and most likely the prompt will come from that list of questions, but I would not suggest going through or preparing for each of those because that's a long list. I think the idea is perhaps if you are really keen to just skim through the kind of questions that they might ask to get an idea on what the prompt can be, and then you can just take it from there, right? Because you never know what kind of question might come. Preparing for hundreds of those will not help too much. Okay, I'll maybe pause here before I move on to talk about how my score journey looked like, in case there are any other questions, anything, Shraddha ma'am, that I missed that you would like me to cover. Happy to do that for the 3 sections.
No, Tanya, I think you covered it in fair detail. Let's discuss more from your presentation, then we can take up questions.
Perfect. Yeah. So just quick overview of what my score journey was like before I got my 333. Like I mentioned, taken a test around September first week to see what the starting score is. And this was just without any practice at all. I scored a 318 with 151 in verbal and 167 in quant, just to see where I was. Then I gave my prep test after actually practicing some of these questions. Got my quant score up to 170 and also a big jump on the verbal score as well. And just getting that 332 in the first practice test was like a real confidence booster for me. I think the biggest one that I was struggling in GMAT while quant was all okay. Verbal was a real demotivator. So I think this really helped get that confidence back up. However, in prep test 2, which I took right before my first attempt, I did not score that well. And when I looked through the questions that I had solved, it was all silly mistakes. Quant, I made really stupid mistakes. It was just an addition subtraction error, which should not have happened. Verbal also, in this one, I made a lot of reading comprehension mistakes. I think that was only perhaps in the last couple of days leading up to this prep test. I had stopped doing RC questions and was only focusing more on vocab so that I make sure that I remember the words for the final exam. I think that was a big mistake. Like I said, it's very important to do, if not 10 questions, do maybe 3 questions every day of each type so that you have the momentum going on for those questions. And then I gave my first attempt, which was a 326, 170 on quant, but 156 on verbal. I think there's a typo error on the bottom. Sorry for that. But basically, when I analyzed the score and where the mistakes were, I found that I'd made a lot of mistakes in the first section. I'd made about, I think, 5-6 mistakes in the first section, but also another 5 mistakes in the second section. If you don't know, GRE is a section adaptive test. So the 2 sections, the level of difficulty that you would get in that section is dependent or based slightly on the first section score or first section, how you do in the first section, right? Since I had a lot of mistakes in the first section, I think it basically reduced the overall difficulty level for the second one and gave me a penalty, which is why there's also a lower score for the same. So it's super important that you make sure that overall from a section perspective, you're covered and you're able to do well in both of those, right? And then between my first attempt and my second attempt was almost about a month difference. I focus again, similar strategy, kept working on verbal, made sure that I did RC as well and did not just let go of RCCR questions because I was getting good accuracy. Kept solving questions, Quant, again, kept solving at least 10 questions every day so that I had the momentum going on. And more the focus was on things that maybe scared me a little bit, and not the ones that I was actually really good at. I don't know if any of you do that. Sometimes I fall into the trap of just wanting to solve questions that I'm naturally good at so that I feel happy about it. But I think that's a strategy that's not going to work at all in this case. So to focus on the ones there where you're making mistakes. So that was my overall journey in getting a 333. Moving on, I think I'd like to share a couple of takeaways from this overall GMAT GRE journey, right? One is practice, practice, practice. I think I've said this enough times. Being regular is super important, even if it means you're spending 60 minutes only every day. It's really important to do a couple of questions across different types of patterns, different types of questions in both quant and verbal. So just keep doing that. Second one is replicate the exam condition for yourself. Time yourself, always do time sets. Definitely do that if you're stressed by the clock. Just recently, I was speaking to someone who's also struggling a little bit with their scores. And I asked them, are you doing time sets? Or you're just sitting and doing questions, saying I'll do 10 questions and then I'll see how many errors I made. And they told me that they're actually quite stressed by the clock, by looking at the clock, because it feels like, oh, I am taking more than 2 minutes a question. What am I going to do? I don't have enough time for the rest of the questions, right? But having that clock will tell you where you're spending more time, if at all, and why you're not able to do the questions in that time period if you're struggling with time. So that is super important. The third one, I think, which Shweta ma'am would keep telling me throughout my journey, is to not overthink the answer. Do not second guess yourself or your logic. Your first intuition or your first thought process is always right, and just believe in that. Overthinking or thinking, oh, why does this seem like a very easy question? GRE can't be asking me easy questions, will only result in errors. So please do not do that. Work with a target date in mind. Set a date that you want to for yourself on when you want to take an attempt and plan backwards from it, including when would you like to do prep tests or the official practice tests that are available on the ETS website, to then how much time would you want to keep on improving that accuracy from prep tests, if at all, towards the final examination, right? The last two, I think, are really important. It might seem quite globe and you would hear this from probably everybody, but believe me, this is very important. Do not make this exam your life. It's not the end of everything. Not getting your score can be stressful, and believe me, I have felt that. But obsessing over these scores is not going to bring you closer to your goal. Maybe surround yourselves with friends and family in case you're stressed at all. Take a break, do something that you enjoy doing for a bit, and then you can get back, right? It's at the end of the day, it's just an exam of some specific questions that you've already prepped for. And the last one is just believe in yourself. A lot of you who've maybe done engineering and other colleges also have gone through much harder exams than this. If at all, for example, you've prepped for JEE, you know what that exam can look like. This is nowhere close to that. So just believe that you can do it and you will get through. I think that's it from a GRE perspective. Shweta ma'am, should we cover questions on GRE before we move on to the profile section, or would you like to cover that first?
Let me see if we have more GRE specific ones. We have a question on what's the accuracy required to get a score of 165 to 170 in verbal and then in quant. Then there's a question on how the other question banks that we use, Kepler or Barron, are they on the higher side than what's listed on GRE? Is there an error log format that you have been able to use? How did you work on improving your accuracy and timing? I think that you have covered.
Sorry, are these questions in the chat because I can't see them? But
These
I'm
are on
happy
the
to maybe pick them up.
Q&A box. These have, if you look, there's a Q&A box. That's where the
I
questions
can only
are.
see 4 questions there, but I'm sure maybe can pick up one by one.
Okay, so the first question is, how much time did you put in every day on an average to study for GRE?
I think more towards the weekends, perhaps over the week. I would maybe put 2 to 3 hours, try to, sometime in the morning, sometime in the afternoon. Sometime in the morning and sometime in the night once I'm done with my work. Weekends is when I would actually stretch a lot. Saturday, Sunday was the main day where I would prep. And also not cram, but I do a lot of the practice tests, the longer tests, which needed me to sit for 2 hours over the weekend. Not having to think about my manager pinging me on the side. So I think that just worked well. So I would say 2-3 hours is good enough, perhaps. In the beginning, of course, you'll have to put in a lot more hours because you'll have to understand how to approach questions, how to actually do those questions. But over time, when you're starting to only solve questions and just focusing on getting that score, 2 to 3 hours, I think, should be good enough. And more hours, maybe perhaps on the weekend.
Is there an error log format that you can share?
So I would typically, again, like I mentioned, for the vocab one, I would have an Excel for myself, which is easier to use, where I would note down the question number, the book that I did that question from, what type of question it was, and what exactly was the error. Make sure that I write it in a similar pattern so that I could filter and see how many questions am I making mistakes in a certain type. To also know, I think being an engineer, perhaps just having those numbers make me feel confident or make me feel like I know what I'm doing. So having those stats was really helpful. For example, say how many mistakes did I make in RC multi-choice questions, right? Or say how many mistakes that I make in critical reasoning boldface type questions. That would tell me what exactly my focus area should be, and then I would work towards that.
Okay. Then there's a question on the non-official question banks that we use. Are they on the higher side than what's tested on GRE?
I think it could be 2 ways. Some of them could be super easy, but some of them I've also found hard. Maybe not from a logic perspective, but sometimes those questions can be super random. And it would feel like everything that you've learned is not applicable, or then it will make you just second guess whether you're applying things correctly or not. So I would just suggest to stay away from those questions completely, because a lot of times I think people are just making questions on their own to make sure they have more questions to solve.
Okay. What's the accuracy required to get a score of 165 to 170 on verbal or on quant? Quant is obviously close to 100%.
I think GRE scores that way are slightly more predictable. It's based on the number of errors in some form that you would make. Now, of course, I mean, at the moment, I can't recall what's the exact conversion, but say in quant, if I were to say, if you get a score of 168, perhaps maybe you've made 2 to 3 mistakes of maybe easy to medium questions. That would probably give you a 168, and similarly for verbal as well. Again, the section adaptiveness also comes into play. So if you make a lot more mistakes in section 1, that will
So I think if I put an average to it, average is you should reduce 1.5 points per error. So if I've made 2 errors, I'm likely to lose 3 points. Given accuracy, then there's the section adaptive nature, then there is the difficulty level. There are many aspects to the scoring, not just accuracy. So average on the, just to have a ballpark figure, one can say 1 error will make me lose 1.5 points. I hope that helps. Tanya, your video froze. Do you want to reconnect? I think we'll just give her a minute to come back. Meanwhile, all the college reps, can we do a picture, a group photo? Can you all put on your videos, please? Ananya, Divyanshi, Nandini, Sneha, Deepanshu, Sanket. Let's take a picture together. Shivam, Sanjay, Ankit. Tanya, we can see your screen. Are you back?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I think today is just absolutely a horrible day with my internet. I don't know what's happening. So sorry for that.
We are getting to see all the young people who've joined us. They are going to be the future of the century. So I am super kicked. I've taken one group photo. We'll do more. Let's carry on. So we looked at questions which were GRE specific. Let's move on to talking about your application. And you know what? What's wonderful is, Tanya, that we started with maybe 50, 60 people and we have crossed 1 hour. And normally it happens that you start with 120 plus, and after 1 hour you have 50, but it's the opposite now.
Yeah.
We have more than 125 people. So with everyone's permission, let's continue.
Yeah. So just I also want to talk about and something that Shweta ma'am suggested would also be really helpful for you guys, as I think a lot of you are still in college. It's just my journey to getting that MBA admit. And I would focus more on what I did in college as well. In hindsight now, I think I learned from my experiences across 3 areas during my undergrad. And of course, I've continued to do so at Bain and outside of work as well. One is just building that professional experience. Do your research, talk to people. Seniors are the best people that you can reach out to just understand where you can go, what can you do, what are the different types of companies that are available for internships during your undergrad. If there are any specific interest areas that you have and would like to explore that, talk to people who worked in that industry to know whether that's something that you would like to do. During my undergrad, being in chemical engineering, I also did my internship with Reliance, realized that petrochemical is something that I didn't want to do. And hence I moved to Unilever. That was the second internship that I did. Really enjoyed my time there. Saw that I could perhaps be working in it. So gave me some more confidence on what kind of things maybe I like doing or what kind of projects that I like doing. And overall build that problem solving skill to be able to actually finally go into consulting, right? The second one is leadership experience. All MBA schools are looking for this. So it's super important that you build that for yourself. Not just from an application perspective, but I think it's an important one just to make sure that you're able to excel beyond your undergrad as well. So find opportunities where you can work in teams, lead initiatives if you can, that are close to you, build that leadership muscle, right? And something that is super close to me while I was an undergrad is I was part of the technical festival, which is Shastra in IIT Madras, and I led a team there. I think more than just the everyday work of having to work or having to think about how to do certain things, just having that team around me and working with different people has been a big learning experience. And the third one, which is also super important, is focus on extracurriculars as well. Of course, apart from acads, your professional experience or your internships and any positions of responsibility or leadership experiences that you have, extracurriculars will also add a lot of weight to your profile. Identify things that motivate you outside work. And sports was that for me. I play badminton in college in the team. I'd also try taking part in other sports. be it swimming, be it athletics, be it volleyball, and so on. It just gave me that mental peace, but also helped me make a end-to-end complete package of my profile and my resume, if I were to say that. So those are the three areas that I've also seen more from a recruitment perspective into companies to, of course, the MBA applications as well, that are super important to show and bring. At the end of the day, I think it's all about how all of this fits into your story, right? And you will have enough time to figure that out. But what I would say and what I have learned across whatever I did in college is, one, do not do these things just for the sake of the profile, because you won't be able to do justice to that. If you are not able to do justice to that, the downside is you will not be able to talk about it passionately. You will not be able to actually defend the kind of work that you've done, and it will show up in how you're talking about it, which will put people into doubt about whether you've actually done something like this, right? Second, try doing new things before dismissing them. If you don't know, my strategy is, if I don't know what I want to do, which is in most of the cases, I do something to eliminate. So I have figured out, if not what I want to do, what I don't want to do over the last couple of years, right? And I think college is the best time to do that, to experiment. So do take out that time to experiment and see something that you might actually really enjoy. And the last one, again, just learn from people, keep talking to people, especially your seniors, ask as many questions as possible. Like it's always said, no question is a dumb question. So keep doing that to help reach that profile that not only a school will want, but also something that you're proud of.
So Tanya, I want to weigh in a little bit over here. After a lot of discussion with admission consultants, I've come to the conclusion, number one, that how you tell your story is very important.
Yeah.
So you played badminton, I believe you were a gold medalist. But that is not going to get an admit. The medal is not getting an admit.
Yeah.
What impact did you create, and what was your learning curve? What was your personal evolution, your growth? So ultimately, what are you bringing to the table as a result of that experience?
Yeah.
That's what's important. So if I, let's say I'm in second year now and I want to get into an extracurricular activity, when I'm doing that activity, whether it's with 4 people or 400 people, I will be mindful of what am I learning and what impact am I creating. Am I getting mentored by someone? Am I mentoring someone? So that kind of learning, that kind of experience, I'm going to be more cognizant of, because that's going to be my story. Then second thing is, a lot of colleges we go to tell us that, if I were an IITian, I'd have more internship opportunities. If I were at Stephens or LSR or SRCC, I'd have more internship opportunities. And my college doesn't have enough internship opportunities. Well, it's not necessary that just because you are at a certain college, you're going to get those opportunities. And again, I hear that, I did so much of research on LinkedIn. I wrote to so many people, I got nothing. And then when I asked them, whom did you write to? They say that we wrote to the HR of all these companies. That's not how you're getting an internship. You have to find out who are your seniors who are working in those places and ask the alumni network to help you. And don't keep waiting for the college to do that. If you do not have, in fact, for the registration for this webinar, we asked for your LinkedIn profile. And one of the main reasons to do that was to get you to make the profile if you don't have it already. You cannot survive without that LinkedIn profile. Make a very good, crisp, attractive LinkedIn profile and use that actively to get your internships. Reach out to the alumni network, see who from your exact department is doing working at a place where you'd like to go, where you'd like to learn. And please use that network. Don't wait for opportunities to fall into your lap. Anything you want to add to that experience, Tanya?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And that's why I really want to stress on the first point here, right? Like, do not do things just for the sake of it. Because like you mentioned, learning from those experiences is very important, and you'll only be able to do that, or you'll only be able to enjoy what you're doing is something if you've chosen because you wanted to do it, and not because someone said that, oh, doing this internship will absolutely get you into this company and that will absolutely get you into a B school, right? So yeah, I think that was the biggest one.
So some questions around college life. There is one question on, ma'am, I am in first year of BTech. What should I do to start building my profile for an MBA abroad? Rohit, I hope this answers your question, all the discussions we've had so far. Anything to add, Tanya?
I think, again, just reiterating, these are the three main areas that you could look for experiences in. And what you do there, of course, will come from your conversations with your seniors, your understanding of build your internship experience. Through that, you'll be able to bring more problem solving. You'll be able to also understand business from a broader perspective. Do something where you're able to also coach people. That will bring your leadership experience as well. Work in teams to show that you're a team player. Yeah, and I think things will fall into place.
Another question is from Adarsh. What do you suggest is an ideal CGPA from the start, that is the very first semester?
I think that's a can I know if this is for engineering, because that's probably something that I can answer. Although I would like to bust a myth that I mean, a lot of people would say that you can't get in anywhere else unless you're like a 9-pointer or you're 9+. That's not true. I am not a 9-pointer at all by any closeness. But yeah, so I think of course, acads matter to some extent. Perhaps depends on how much weightage would be based on which profession you want to go into. If you're, say, looking for slightly more core kind of work within your specific domain, then perhaps acads will matter a lot more in those specific subjects. But if you're looking at a more non-core type, more holistic or more broader, consulting is an example, job, then I think what matters is that full picture of what you're doing in terms of acads, plus your internships, leadership experiences, extracurriculars, and so on. So it's about building an entire profile rather than just obsessing over a number, is what I would say.
I think I was saying this earlier also, Tanya, that if you're applying for a deferred admit or you're applying to an MS or PhD straight from college, then the CGPA matters more if you don't have work experience to show. And if CGPA is low, you have work experience, then you need a higher GRE or GMAT score to make up for it. One more thing I want to add, looking at your slide itself, is when you're building a profile, you're doing stuff, and you were saying don't do things for the sake of doing. I might be looking at applying to an MBA, but I don't necessarily need to maybe join the entrepreneurship cell or something. If Shastra is what you wanted to do, you did that.
Yeah.
There's a force fit.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's move on.
I think that was majorly it. We can cover any more questions. I'm also happy to answer any questions in case there are doubts around differences between GMAT versus GRE, given I've gone through that. But happy to cover anything else as well, apart from that.
Folks, if you want to ask your questions using the audio, please raise your hand and give you audio rights. Otherwise, you can put your questions on the Q&A box. Any more questions? So some in the question box, which we already have, is around any tips for GMAT and how did you cope with the difficulties on the verbal section? How did you stay? I think the most relevant question is how did you stay confident and motivated throughout your prep journey?
If I'm being very honest, I wasn't motivated throughout the journey. Shweta ma'am would know. There have been instances where I've just called up and I've just been like, I don't know what to do because I'm not getting a score. I think what just helped is to keep going at it from one day to another to a month, to keep just doing questions, make sure that you know what you're trying to aim for, because a GRE or a GMAT is just the starting point. It's just the score that will help you start your journey. So it's not the end of everything. I think that's what just kept me motivated. Though I would say, I think once I switched, that was like a big stress relief for me once I knew that, or the end goal seemed closer from a GRE perspective. So I think more so I was less stressed during my GRE prep versus GMAT in that case.
So Sanjay is asking about work experience versus an MBA from the perspective of a fresher. Sanjay, I'm assuming you're asking about doing an MBA immediately after college versus gaining work experience. If that is so, then that doesn't apply really to MBA abroad, because even if you get a deferred admit, you would work for a couple of years before joining the MBA. So maybe your question could be more like an Indian MBA versus an MBA abroad. Let us know, Sanjay, if that's the direction you want to go in. Meanwhile, we have a question from Vineet about Wharton, that you have a consulting background and you're going to Wharton, which is supposed to be finance heavy. So how do you justify that transition?
I think before that, maybe Sanjay is mentioning that that's what he's talking about. I think he's talking about the deferred 2+2.
Versus so Sanjay, is it Indian versus global, or is it deferred versus traditional? Indian versus global. All yours, Tanya. You come from the place that represents IIT IIM. There's that IIT IIM matrimony that happens. So Indian MBA versus global MBA.
I think there is no one answer to this, is what I would say. I think it depends on what you're looking for at that moment. When I was graduating from IIT Madras, I don't think I even thought that I'd want to do an MBA ever, or at some point in my life. That's also a reason I never thought about giving a GMAT or a GRE. In my mind, a GRE was more if I wanted to do a master's, and that absolutely I did not want it to do. So at that moment, I actually did not think about it. Once I joined Bain, over a couple of years, I think I realized that perhaps it's time to maybe get slightly more global experience. And that's something that I wanted to look at. More than, of course, just an MBA degree, but being around people from different backgrounds, different countries, to just add to that experience that I've already had so far from undergrad, but also working at Bain. The kind of experiences I got at Bain maybe is also a catalyst to that. The global exposure that I got through consulting made me want to do more of that, and hence I decided to do more of global MBA. To see if I'd want to ever switch geographies. I think that's the option that I wanted to keep open for myself. So I would say there's no one answer to this. I think at the end of the day, it's what you're looking for. I know of people who've been in IIMs and then they've joined the company of their dream. I also know of people who've joined a global MBA and they've also joined a company of their dream. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter as long as you're happy with wherever you want to go.
Speaking from a more like a broader perspective, I see a lot of people going to the IIMs and then following it up with a global MBA, because the doors that a global MBA opens in general are way, way bigger. If you want to work at the head office of an MNC, you'd typically need a global MBA. It's highly unlikely that you'll do an Indian MBA and then land up at the head office of a global company. So it really depends upon what are your career goals, what are your priorities, where do you want to, what ladder you want to climb, basically. You want to climb the Indian ladder or the global ladder. Let's put it that way. That's the difference. And yes, if you are thinking of an Indian MBA, you can do one straight out of college. But for the global MBA, it's a little bit more of a planned affair. It takes just 1 or 2 years of planning to set it off. You know, you have to take these exams, you have to do the entire application process. So it's a more deferred gratification that happens. You put in a year or two of planning and effort, a couple of years of the MBA, you pay off your loan for 2, 3 years, So over a cycle of 5-6 years, you'll finally enjoy the fruit of the effort. But then it's way, way worth it. I hope that
And
helps.
just to
Thank
add,
you.
right, like from whatever I know, people wanting to do global MBA is because of 2-3 reasons, right? One, of course, if you're looking for a geography switch, that's one. Second, like Shweta ma'am said, it's what kind of ladder you want to go up, but it's also what kind of industries that you're looking at. Perhaps maybe you don't have enough opportunities in the SaaS space. I'm just making things up, but just for an example, maybe US, of course, US is a more mature market and you want to do something in the SaaS space, you would want to shift to US, for example. Or maybe in VCs, you want to do more of certain industries which is not growing in India, and hence you would want to shift to the location where you can actually work at. And third, like I mentioned, it's more the global exposure that people are looking at. Perhaps they may not settle down long term. They gain that experience, come back and maybe do something of their own in India. But yeah, these are the couple of reasons that I've seen people choosing a global MBA for.
Interestingly, I find people who want to move up the same ladder very quickly and have global packages while in India choose the same route. So we have, Tanya, people who are now seniors at Bain in India or Asia. They went from an associate level at Bain, they went to do a global MBA, and they're back at super senior levels, enjoying packages comparable with what they would have gotten in the US. So that also makes sense. So you bypass a lot of steps if you do that. Okay, so can we go to Vinny's question about Wharton finance and consulting background? And he has a follow-up question. Did you approach every application form from a different perspective after identifying what the specific colleges are looking for?
So to answer the first one on consulting versus finance, I think when they say that a school is known for something, it doesn't mean that they are not known for the others. At the end of the day, your class is what makes the experience in terms of what you want to do, right? I know a lot of people, if you actually see, let me maybe just show you one slide that might help. If you actually see this, and this is available on the Wharton website, right? If you just see this is the class on how the class looks like in Wharton. And if you see the most number of people that go in is from consulting. So it's not so much about where you're going from. I think it's also about what you want to do there. And having gone through the process of different B school, but also having gone through their curriculum, every school offers a good mix of whatever you wanted to do, be it entrepreneurship, be it if you wanted to go into consulting, be it if you wanted to actually do something in finance. It's not to say that if a school is great at finance, they wouldn't be able to give you the skills to be a good consultant. I think it's just more, perhaps you would find a lot more alums who've done finance work, and that's why you're hearing this name a lot from a finance perspective. But I think everyone, I mean, all these schools have good enough resources for wherever you want to go. So I don't think that is a concern at all if you're thinking about it.
Sanket, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to speak? Do you have a question?
Hey, thank you, Shweta. Thank you, Tanya, for sharing insights. So I have a question. First of all, I find your prep journey very inspiring. So what's your experience on applying directly in round two? Because I mean, what I heard from different people is that people do hedge their bets by selecting some schools in round one and then taking feedback accordingly and then applying in round two for a few of their dream schools. So what is your experience directly applying in round two? Because like you didn't get your target score by that time.
So, I mean, I think the short answer is I could not apply in round one because I did not have a score to apply. It's more defined by that. Although before anything else, what I'd like to clarify is I don't think there is any difference between round one versus round two in terms of getting an admit. It's not that if you don't apply in round one, your chances are going to be lower because they've already selected certain people and so on. They always have that demarcation in terms of different rounds. So applying in round one versus round two is not going to change your chances if that is also a question in your mind. The only, I think, difference is with applying in round one as well as round two is it just gives you more time. So you can actually, like Sanket, you also mentioned, you can actually decide, maybe do 3-4 schools in round one and do the rest in round two. What though happened with me is I could only apply to a few schools. But I think the good thing was I also wanted to apply to only those schools. So it eventually worked out for me.
Okay,
Did
makes
that
sense.
answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I think there was another question that we missed to say, if I approached all the schools in a different way or a same way. In terms of the story, I think there's only one story that I could make for myself of whatever I've done in the journey in the last couple of years. It's even getting to that one story is not that easy. It requires a lot of thinking, a lot of sitting down and actually thinking what you've done in life to see where you are right now. So in terms of story building, I use the same story across different schools because, of course, that's what defines me. Writing any other story would not do justice to whatever work I've done so far. But in terms of how I approached it, of course, the approach is different for different schools because the essays themselves are very, very different for the different schools. For example, in Wharton, the essays are a lot more research-based. For example, one of the questions is how will you add value to the Wharton classroom, which you would talk about, say, I have XX experience and hence I can maybe, I don't know, work in this club and make sure that I coach my peers on that industry if they wanted to go there, right? Versus HBS essay is more around just tell me about yourself, something about your life, which is extremely open-ended and gives you the chance to speak about anything that is close to you, any specific thing that you've done in your life that you wanted to talk about, and so on. So the way you would approach the essay questions is probably different, but you're still using that instances of whatever you have done so far, right? Like whatever your life story is.
So, Tanya, I've heard that if you do your Wharton essay and I think your Kellogg essay, you can probably extrapolate and do 5-6 other schools from there. But that
Yeah.
HBS and Stanford are very unique and they need their own attention. So, if I were applying to HBS, Stanford, Wharton, and a host of other schools, I'd probably need 2-3 months because I'd want to give 1 or 2 months only to my HBS and Stanford applications, and then maybe Wharton and other schools another month or 6 weeks. So I hope that adds to the answer. You need a good 3 months to do justice to your applications, which is why admission consultants recommend, if you're applying in round one, to have your scores way in advance. Round one deadlines are in September, but you should have your scores by June. And since most of your college students and you might be looking at deferred time deadlines are in April. So you should try to have your score by Jan Feb so that you can work on your applications properly. Do we have more questions? Are you aware, Tanya, about STEM field rankings? There's a question on that. Masters in STEM.
Not really, but
What sources are reliable? The question is to figure out the rankings for masters in STEM, which ranking is reliable, QS rankings, Time, or US News.
I wouldn't be aware of it.
Mostly US News is what I've heard of. The other rankings, which are typically driven by certain magazines, a lot of magazines come out with their own rankings. They can be influenced by the schools and the advertisements. So US News is Poets and Quants, US News, things which are not affected by, let's say, advertisements, maybe a good source of ranking. If we don't have any more questions, can we switch on our videos? Let's do a group picture. Anya, Rohit, Adarsh, we have a lot of college reps here with us. Divyanshi, Shivam, Sanjay. Please switch on your cameras. Sanket, Ankit, Neha. Anaya, Priya, Ananya, Nandini. Hey, cheese. Thank you. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you for sharing everything so generously. It was very, very enriching, and I'm so glad we could do this.
I hope it was helpful for everyone. Thanks a lot for joining all.
So, will we be sharing the PDF of your presentation?
Sorry?
Can we share a PDF of your presentation?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. That should be okay.
Awesome. So you have a WhatsApp group dedicated to your journey, which has more than 200 people, and they would love to have the PPT so they can do their own research. Thank you once again. Enjoy your weekend, folks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Shweta ma'am, for having me.
Thank you.